We are now live.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to give a couple seconds to let everybody roll in, and then we'll get started in just a minute. All right, so welcome to our presentation today. As you can see, we have a great group of students and educators. Our presentation today is in collaboration with the Urban Assembly, hosted by Brandon Frame, titled No Advisory, No Problem, Implementing High Quality SEL when Advisory Isn't an Option. We're aiming for about 90 minutes today. My name is Emily, and I'm going to walk you through the Zoom system before we get started. Just so you know, this is being recorded, and everyone will receive a replay at the end of the presentation to share with your teams. If you're having trouble seeing your screen, you should first exit the full screen view. If you still can't see the slides, you can double click on the small box at the top middle of your screen and it should bring up the slide deck. You should also see the three functions at the bottom of the screen. The chat feature can be used to chat together, so why don't we try that out and let us know your name, district or organization, and job title. The Q&A button is down there too. This is where you can pose any questions for our presenters today. So be sure to use that instead of the chat if you have questions. That way we can make sure we get them answered. Finally, the raise the hand function. Please use this function if you're having any tech issues, and we will reach out via chat one-on-one so we can help address any issues. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. So please send all of your questions to that Q&A box for us to answer. And I think that covers my end, and I know we're really excited to hear from everybody today. So Brandon, I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. So good to see everyone joining us. Keep dropping into the chat where you're checking in from. We see the whole country is in attendance. We see Vermont, Delaware, I saw Texas, South Carolina, I saw UMass. And the list goes on. California is on the check-in as well. So it's just really great to see everybody here because there's so many people that are committed to social emotional learning, committed to seeing what social emotional learning looks like as we build up the next generation of students. My name is Brandon Frame. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning at the Urban Assembly. The Urban Assembly is a nonprofit organization focused on improving public education through and improving students' social and economic mobility. And so within the SEL department, we work with schools and districts across the country around implementation and helping to build the capacity and help organize the systems around the principles of social emotional learning. And so before I introduce the school that we're highlighting today, I have to take you on a little bit of a story. And so we've been working with BTech, as you'll learn, Business Technology Early College High School, for 3 years. But I have to start with how we got here. And so it was a summer day in 2018. And so BTech happens to be located in Queens. And for those who don't necessarily know the New York City subway system, me and my boss at the time, David Adams, who's now the CEO of the Urban Assembly, we decided to take the E train all the way to Jamaica Station. And so that's one part of Queens. And so then we took a bus from Jamaica Station to BTech. And so this bus ride was about 45 minutes or so, on top of the fact that we were on the train for another 45 minutes. So it took us a while to get out there. And I just remember looking at my boss's face, and I looked at him and I said, I'll take this school. This will be in my portfolio of schools. But I had not been to BTech. I had not met anybody from BTech. All we had was email communication. But it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I ever made, because when I got to the school and then spent the time working with the staff and the students here, it was one of my favorite trips to make, like every 2 or 3 weeks, to go visit and see the work that was happening. And so I'm so honored to be highlighting their school today and the work that they've done over the last 3 years to build and implement and develop the students' social emotional learning skills. And so without further ado, I have the opportunity to introduce the esteemed leader who is by far one of the best principals in New York City public schools, Ms. Patrice Henry, and I'll turn over to her so that you can learn more about BTech.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Brandon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our SEL Showcase. Before I get started, I would just put an exclamation point to what you just said, Brandon, and basically what my slogan is kind of, we're far, but we're worth the trip. So I hope that virtually you feel the same way, that the time with us together was really meaningful and you're able to glean some insight as it relates to your specific schools. So because we have folks joining us from all over, I want to just create a little bit of context. So Business Technology Early College High School is one of 9, what's called 9 through 14 early college career CTE schools with a focus on STEM industry, specifically technology, right? So that's a really big, bold vision that we have for our schools. And we believe that education fosters individual and social transformation, and that the purpose of school is really to create the conditions for students to thrive and to reach their fullest potential. So once we established that as a vision for our school, we had to start thinking about how do we actually accomplish this. And so we started with our college partners. So we partnered with a community college. And one of the things that we learned really quickly was what they gave us feedback on was essentially one of the critical factors for success in college is really around soft skills. Soft skills, what we define now as social emotional learning. And so once we know that, right, we have to think about how does our program reflect that? And so that's kind of where the interest and the partnership with Urban Assembly actually got birthed. And we're really excited about how we've grown over the last 3 years. So one of the things that, our partners would say to us is, students need to know how to advocate for themselves, right? They need to know how to use resources. They need to know how they learn best. These are critical when we start going up through post-secondary education to ensure that students are successful in college and life. And so what we ended up doing, even at our school, was we recognized that pattern as well, right? We created a vision for ourselves about what the ideal graduate from BTech would be. And we did recognize that it needed to be skills, habits, and mindsets that our young people had that would translate well beyond their time with us. That's the first part. The second part is, how do we actually implement this? How do we actually create a master program, a master schedule that would allow our students to build their social emotional competencies throughout their journey with us so they could be successful? And you'll hear about that more in detail when you get to hear from our students and our educators about their journey and their experiences. But that was a really, really critical part of our work and our implementation process. Everybody on this call, I think we all can acknowledge that this pandemic has been hard on all of us, right, in different ways. And if you are akin to the news, you recognize that for New York City, we really were the epicenter of this. And our school community was an example of this. We suffered loss of family members within our school community. We have high levels of housing and food insecurities, technology access, mental health challenges, and the list goes on about how the pandemic kind of exacerbated some of the challenges that our school community already faced. And so as we thought about and even started to enter this academic year, we really, really wanted to create tiers of support in terms of social emotional learning. We wanted to ensure that all the students were getting access to social emotional learning, but we recognize the importance of the 9th grade. The 9th grade is a really critical transitional year for our young people, especially during the year of a pandemic. And so what you'll see is how we really try to double down on that to kind of help build and support our young people so they could be successful, even given the challenges and the realities that we face. So my hope for our time together is that you're able to hear some of the creative solutions, the creative ways we're tackling this challenge within our school community, and that they'll be able to inspire you as you continue to think about your own schools and how you're going to build back better when we get on the other side of the pandemic. So with that, I'll turn things back over to you, Brandon.
Thank you so much, Ms. Henry. And I'm now going to introduce the instructional lead who's been leading the work for the last 3 years, Ms. Ashley Prashad.
Hi, everyone. So as mentioned, my name is Mrs. Prashad, and I am a special education teacher at BTech, as well as instructional lead of the Resilient Scholars program here as well. Now, as you know, the name of our showcase today is No Advisory, No Problem. So we'll be explaining how we are still able to implement high quality social emotional learning when advisory is not an option. So for starters, we're going to go into who are the members of our team. So we have Mr. Malik, who is our health teacher, which is where the SEL curriculum is implemented. We have our school social worker, Mrs. Ketying, who works very closely with our social work intern from Fordham, Mrs. Pawlinski, who you will get to meet later on. And of course, the director of social emotional learning, Mr. Brandon Frank. Now, the beauty of working with Urban Assembly is that within the school system, which most of us are a part of, change is inevitable. And with this program and by working together, we've been able to make SEL work for us in many different ways. We had our first year, which started as a standalone advisory period with freshmen only. And then next we worked on expanding the program in our second year, and it continued as a standalone advisory, but with freshman and sophomore classes. However, unfortunately, at the end of the school year was when we experienced a shift from in-person to remote learning due to the challenges of COVID-19. As Ms. Henry stated in her introduction, there were certain challenges that we needed to face in order to make sure that we were able to still implement high quality SEL. So prior to the start of our current school year, we thought about new ways to implement SEL virtually, in addition to the start of a new school year and accommodating the constraints of COVID. Now, integrating SEL into a content class with ease would help with an easy transition of the content as well as exposure to all incoming freshmen by choosing health. Now, with the tools that the Urban Assembly provided, such as the implementation rubric and the program matrix, which you'll hear more about in a few minutes from Katrina, this was able to be possible. All right, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So many of you are here wondering how we were able to make this transition without a standalone period such as advisory. Easy enough, there are 3 components to health: mental, emotional, and physical. And they're all taught together and work together in order to help create a well-rounded student in our school system. Now that SEL is being incorporated into health, we needed to reimagine how this class was taught. So similar to prior years, we were able to reach every incoming 9th grade student, but the added benefit of choosing health this year is that health is a required class. Therefore, every incoming child, it was mandatory for them to have this class. We are constantly evolving as a school and embracing change, which means that we're always going to find new ways to be innovative. At the beginning of the school year, our dedicated time to plan was after school, which was what we were able to work together considering our different programs and the circumstances of COVID. This eventually became 2 planning periods, which allowed us to reflect on last week's lessons, what were our highlights, what are things that we can work on, and then also plan next week's lesson, which allows us to either build on those skills that we already taught or introduce a new skill to the kids. And the beauty of this is that with health as content, health and SEL, the SEL curriculum go hand in hand with each other. So incorporating new skills was fairly easy for us. As we continue to work through the global pandemic together, it's important to highlight how we communicate with students in order to better help them. We have to put ourselves in a student's shoes. And to me personally, and at our school, we believe that that's a departure from speaking at students to speaking with students. We need to be able to understand them and help create a foundation for supportive relationships for them. COVID created barriers for not only just our society, but across the city, the implications were especially difficult for schools. We needed to make sure that we kept SEL and the students' needs at the top of our priority list. At BTEC, it did present challenges, but they were minimal because we already had an existing SEL program in place. Now, this allowed us to focus on specific skills that we felt should be prioritized due to the pandemic. There was an increased focus on self-care and self-advocacy, which allowed the kids to really build their relationship skills as well as the processing of their emotions. Additionally, with a number of social justice issues present in our country, it's important that our students are encouraged to be engaged in discussing the importance of the events. That way we are able to help them work through it. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you all Mrs. Pawinski, who is our social work intern, who will continue with the presentation and give you some more insight on the logistics of the program.
Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure I'm sharing my screen correctly. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, so there we go. All right, so one of the unique things about our team is that we do have a social worker on the team. So I am an intern currently, and I have a supervisor within the school, Mrs. Ketting, who was highlighted earlier. Anyway, so we wanted to make sure that we talked about why there's a benefit to having a social worker on the team here. So from a macro perspective, looking at the curriculum, it allows there to be another perspective on student comprehension and developmental stages. This also makes sure that all lessons are provided with inclusive language and trauma-informed feedback, which is so important in the current social justice era. From a clinical perspective, though, it also provides expeditious identification for students that may need intervention, that are experiencing challenges that we wouldn't necessarily recognize right away. We do this via daily mood checks. So Malix, every lesson he teaches starts off with a mood check. He asks from a score of 1 to 10, how does everyone feel? If any student says that they're 4 or lower on that mood scale, he will reach out to those students individually, usually in the form of Google Chat, to see what's going on. If there happens to be a pattern of low mood scores, he will make a referral to myself, the social work intern, and then I can start to do that outreach with the support of my supervisor, Mrs. Ketting. And then, so that means that students that would benefit for additional support are receiving that wouldn't necessarily otherwise get that support because they wouldn't be identified or be referred. So this is an example of what one of those mood checks look like. So it's right there in the chat. He starts with from 1 to 10, how do you feel? And they just put in the chat how that's going. So this is a screenshot from a lesson of Mr. Malix's. So the most important part about SEL skill building is making sure that students are receiving feedback and appropriate assessment so they know their growth areas. So the best way to provide feedback is obviously in real time, and we'll show you some examples of that with the demo lesson. Also with assignment comments. So anytime the assignments come in, Mr. Malix is making sure that he's providing great information to these students or asking them to elaborate more when it comes to SEL skills. The other wonderful assessment tool that we utilize is the Aperture DESA self-rate. We were part of the pilot program this year where the kids did this online, and it's administered to our students twice a year. We do it in the first half of the school year, and this informs the students of their baselines as well as their competencies. And once they're a part of the Aperture program, they actually are provided self-directed learning strategies so the students can do their own independent learning if they would like to in the areas that they may need growth in. we take this information to steer our lesson planning to include what kind of trends come up with SEL skills. So if we're noticing most of our students are falling lower on the social management area, then we'll add more of those type of lessons and skills within the health curriculum. They'll then take the same assessment at the end of the school year, and this will allow the students to see how they've grown throughout the year, and then it'll help us as a planning team to assess the successes of our lessons and maybe where we fell short or where we did really well and celebrate it. So this is a little visual of what these competency strategies look like. This is coming from the DESA self-rate. So when they take that self-rate, the competencies are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, goal-directed behavior, personal responsibility, decision-making, and optimistic thinking. So as you can see, the student, the color bars are associated with the competencies, and it shows you where they are. That blue section is the normal. The upper portion would be strengths, and the lower portion would be where they'd be working on. So we take that information and we implement it against our Urban Assembly implementation rubric and matrices. So through the Urban Assembly, we have our wonderful platform of lesson planning and assessment tools. And so then we can look at how we've rated ourselves with our programming and how it compares to how the students are actually reporting back. So that's wonderful for us because it allows us to assess our efficacies in our program implementation and maybe where there's a disconnect if we thought we were doing better, but the results aren't showing that, and vice versa. So now we're going to go on to some actual integration examples of what it looks like in health. So this is a cute little example that Mr. Malix did for his students to help with perspective building. So as you can see in the first photo on the left, onto my left, it says happiness is nowhere. But if you unfold that paper and you separate the word nowhere and nowhere, you now have happiness is now and here. So being able to build beyond for that perspective building. So right here, we're going to learn, watch Mr. Malix on a quick video about time management. And this is a lesson from School Connect. And Malix highlights some health directives in a time management video.
That don't matter, that they're time wasters. They're like playing a lot of video games or watching lots of Netflix or just mindlessly scrolling through social media or watching silly YouTube video after YouTube video, just the time wasters. And so let's say you wake up in bed and you get on your phone and you're just kind of like spending your time on these things. And these rocks symbolize the things that are actually important in life, the things that you value, the things that are really important. Could be like exercise and health, cleanliness and grooming, any hobbies you might have, the time you spend with your family, time you spend faith, like any religious tradition that you devote your time with, your romantic life, your friends.
So what he's showing in this is that when you do the mindless stuff first, so the beans, and then you try to put your priorities in, it doesn't fit in that container. So he finishes the lesson here.
Every person, every adult has to decide what is important in my life and what isn't. And so for me, my career goes first, or else I wouldn't be able to afford this place. The friends, romantic life, the hobbies, exercise, my family, my faith, and keeping this place clean. And when you realize if you put those things first, you end up having enough time for the silly stuff too. You know, we don't want to just like have a life it's all work and it's no play and but you realize if you actually prioritize things, you can actually have a fuller life where everything you want to do gets accomplished.
So this is one way that Malix has been able to integrate time management skills, but still highlighting health directives.
That don't matter.
Trying to play it again. There we go. So this is going to be a fuller demo lesson. I may have to cut a little short for time, but this is going to be a full lesson that Malix teaches. And this particular lesson is called breaking versus bouncing rather than breaking. And the particular video is 2 separate classes that have been spliced together. So please bear with our technology if it's a little jolty.
All these 10s already. So we don't even have much room to go. But this point of this lesson was ways of feeling good. Okay, and so hopefully the kids who are 8, like Kamaya, might move up to 10 by the end of this period. So, Talon's feeling tired out of 3. We're gonna raise you up today, Talon. We're gonna raise you up. You're gonna be feeling better when this is over.
What we're doing in health today is resiliency. Okay, how we bounce back. How we bounce back from difficulties. So, who can read my statement? Let me read the top. Resilience is bouncing rather than breaking. Who would like to read the following? Do I have any volunteers to start off the first points of the day? Anybody volunteer to read my statements? Ravi, go for
We
it.
talked in December about bouncing rather than breaking. When faced with challenges, the entire world, almost all people during this pandemic experience challenges, fears, sadness, and loss. We're looking forward to bouncing back together as the neighborhood, city, and the global community as time goes on. But now, if COVID never happened, and after it's a distant memory, we're going to experience difficulties and maybe painful times in our lives. Things are just not always going to go the way we want.
Excellent. So we're all kind of bouncing back from the pandemic. The whole world is bouncing back. But even if we didn't have COVID, we're all going to have bad times. We're all going to have tough times where things are just not always going to go our way. And that's just the nature of reality. But what we need to do is learn how to bounce back each time. Okay? Each time. So what does this quote mean? I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. If anyone doesn't know, Thomas Edison is the person whose company invented light bulbs, movies, recording, music recording in general, and a whole lot of other electrical uses that changed the world. But of those huge accomplishments, there was 10,000 experiments that went wrong. And what he says is, I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. What does that quote mean? Who's going to get these points? I want to scatter the points around so everyone gets hundreds. I got a hand raised from Javier. Go for it, Javi.
I think like the quote means to like never give up, even if you fail multiple times. So it's just saying that you like
Excellent.
if you just keep trying, you'll find a way.
Excellent. Never give up. Okay, you always trust the athlete to come up with that. Like you can't just give up just because you lost. Just because someone played better than you, you're going to get better than them. Okay, excellent.
Okay. Who can tell me one challenge, difficulty, hardship that they had to get through and how they got through it? If you're comfortable speaking out, great. If you want to type in the chat, that works too. Ariella? You're up.
In middle school, I had always like this fear of performing or presenting in front of other people, and everybody always told me you had to get used to it. That wasn't easy for me because I'm a shy person. So one day, like we had like this dance class, so we had to like perform for the assembly, and I wasn't prepared for this, but I was like, okay, there are going to be people here. I have to at least do my best. So it was kind of like motivation in a way to like, okay, get this over with, but at least give some effort or something, even though it's scary.
How'd you feel after you went through it?
Like, before I had a nervous breakdown, but after, like, I was just relieved it was over.
Thank you. So today's learning objective is I can learn to practice additional methods of bouncing back rather than breaking when faced with challenging situations and emotions. So the point is resilience. That's the point of the lesson. Also known as toughness, is just the ability to recover from difficulties and challenges in life. That's what toughness really is, just coming back from difficulties, because we all gonna have difficulties. So we first introduced this to the class back in November, where there was the ball. It was like bouncing back like a ball rather than breaking like an egg, just like the gift that we see. The ball bounces back while the egg kind of smashes and stays down there. So can anybody remember anything from that lesson? Anyone? More points. People. Just remember one thing from that lesson. There's little hints down here.
What was the question?
Who can remember something from the lesson on bouncing rather than breaking?
Oh, the ball. Leave the ball on the floor. Yeah.
Shawnee, excellent. We should always bounce back and not break like an egg. Yes. Okay. If that's all that you remember, then great. As long as we remember that.
So what is this video? What did it just demonstrate to us? Feel free to go verbal. Blended kids, you don't got anybody else around you to feel bad about. Talon, you want to speak? Hopefully you're not lagging. Damn, you're lagging.
Am I lagging?
Yeah, you could type it into the chat. Type it into the chat. It's kind of like peer pressure in a way. Yes, it is. Points for Adrian. For Adrian. Javier, you got a hand up.
Like basically, when they were cheering her on, she felt good and she felt confident in herself, and like that was basically a confident booster for her. So she felt like she can make it, so she made them. So like when the guy, he was already good, but when he messed up, it wasn't really messing up. He had a iPhone though, but basically when he messed up, everybody was booing him. So he lost his confidence and he didn't feel like he could shoot anymore. So he just started messing up.
Exactly. They got in his head, and they got in both their heads, and she suddenly got pretty good, 4 out of 10, and he went down to 6 out of 10. He went down to 6 out of 10 after nailing almost all of them before. So what is the message behind that? Please speak verbally. I got Joshua says, from him being degrading by the crowd made him play worst. First points for Joshua.
Never let anyone get into your head.
Yeah, that's one way. That's one way to look at it.
I mean, but that's how when it's like a crowd of people. So
yes. Do you have?
So this basically like shows us how your words and your actions affect people.
Right. How it affects the people around you.
You have people in your life that encourage you. Mention who they are. Verbally would be best, but if you want to say it in the chat, fine. If you got someone in your life that encourages you, and how do they do it? Come on, everyone's got someone. Zara, go for it.
My mom encourages me a lot because when I feel like not confident, she makes me like feel better.
Excellent. Saif says mom. Carlos says parents. Anybody else want to share verbally would be great. Carlos, speak on it.
My dad, like, he always tells me to never think negative, like always think positive when like you're doing like stuff that you probably can't, and he's like, you always gotta think positive, and you're like, you never gotta think negative.
Great. You guys got some good parents. I got Maya saying, my daddy always checks up on me and helps me when I'm down. Jason, you were speaking?
Yeah, my mom, my dad, and my grandparents. They all are happy for me when I do something good, and they try to encourage that.
Awesome. Great. Ish says his
My brother.
friend group does so. Who's anyone else sharing out verbally? Aaliyah says her cousins always encourage me to do my best. Famita says her parents and her friends. I can always talk to my friends when I am down. Excellent. It's good to have good friendships like that. No one, to be honest? Well, we'll work on that, Amir. Rayon's coach. Rayon's coach. Okay. I'll encourage you, Amir. You can do this. So what's really happening is that those outside voices.
All right, so hopefully that gave you a great understanding of how we're able to integrate our SEL skills into a health lesson with Mr. Malix. As I mentioned prior to with the time management video, that came from School Connect, which is an additional resource that we use alongside with Aperture and our Urban Assembly Resilient Scholars Program to develop these SEL curriculum. And this bouncing rather than breaking lesson was also a School Connect lesson. So we're near the end of our presentation here. I just wanted to show you a couple of assignments examples. So going off that same bouncing rather than breaking lesson, what's really about like perspective building, right? So if you have one statement, how can you change it to maybe be a little bit easier to deal with? So one student chose a very dear topic to a lot of people, which is losing a relative. And the initial kind of automatic thought would be, for this person, was just give up on everything. I'd feel like there is nothing that matters anymore. So that's their initial automatic thought and behavior. And if we ask them to sit on that thought and maybe think of another way to reframe it, this student thought, I would use that experience and spend much more time with relatives so that I won't regret anything. So really helping these students create resiliency skills in addition that goes along with those SEL skills. So that concludes our PowerPoint presentation, and I'll give it back to Brandon.
Thank you so much, Katrina. That was amazing to really see again. No advisory, no problem. That's what our topic was today. We know that, you know, not every school has space for advisory, right? Not every school can have that. So, and BTech is one of those schools. And so they adapted their structures to put it into health class. So I'm happy that you all got to see that. You got to see how we use School Connect, which is the curriculum, learn a little bit more with Aperture and how we use the self-assessment with students. And so now we have to meet the educators, right? So our next part of this is to hear from the educators, and then you'll hear from the students as well. But first, we'll start with the educators who actually make this fly in their school. So we're going to start with Mr. Malix. We're gonna allow for each teacher to introduce themselves and say what they teach, and then something interesting about themselves as well. And so we'll start with Mr. Malix. You're on mute.
Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Malix. I teach phys ed and health and global studies. Fun fact about me, I wanted to be a history professor, but here I am teaching gym and health now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malix. Turn to Ms. O'Neill.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Brandon just stated, my name is Ms. O'Neill. I am a former SEL advisory teacher. We'll get into that in a little bit. I currently teach phys ed and health along with Mr. Malix at BTech, and I'm super excited to be here with you all.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lewis.
Have to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Miss Lewis. I'm also a former advisory teacher. I teach ELA 12th grade right now. And something interesting is I run a girls group at the school called GEM. And I feel like that's kind of connected to SEL. We deal with the girls' self-awareness, relationship skills. So I think that's a good way to get my fix when I'm not teaching advisory.
Amazing. And also for this portion, Ms. Katrina, who you've heard from, as well as Ms. Prashad, will also be sharing some of their thoughts to the questions that we're going to be asking during this portion. And again, I just want to reflect, as you heard from the teachers, you can see the transition over the years. So you had some people who were former advisory teachers. So you, in that PowerPoint, you saw that the first 2 years there was dedicated time, and then how we've moved that into the health class space. And so I'm going to start with my first question, and we're going to start with Mr. Malix. How do teachers learn to teach SEL skills?
I myself learned through a series of training sessions, in-person professional learning pre-pandemic, and prior to implementing the Resilient Scholars Program in my health class this year, I attended a week of urban assembly training in August. I was able to learn about skills and implement them in my own life so I could better introduce and reinforce these same skills with my students. We had years of these sessions because it was definitely a priority already at BTech prior to the pandemic, and me explicitly teaching SEL.
Mr. Malix, you hit on some really important points there, and I know that everybody on here can relate to the importance of adult SEL development and what we want to do with our kids and why we have to build that up in adults as well. So, Mr. Malix, thank you so much for highlighting that. And so, Ms. O'Neill, you also would like to share a little bit of how do teachers learn to teach SEL skills?
As a former SEL advisory teacher, we learned pre-pandemic as well. In a week in August, we got to travel all the way to far out Manhattan and meet in person with other educators from all over New York City public schools who also were part of the Urban Assembly family. And we even got to visit some of those schools during something similar to this, but a live version of it, where we watched live classes in middle schools and high schools all across New York City, again, part of the Urban Assembly Network. And in those sessions, we got to ask questions and kind of in real time, learn some things that we can turn key into our classes at BTech. So that's how we learned, kind of on the go training, and think it's proven to be beneficial and helpful.
Ms. O'Neill, you took me back. You got me reminiscing and getting nostalgic of doing in-person professional development and work. So excited. And for everybody listening, part of that training is to work on these, to learn about these lessons. So across the Urban Assembly Network, we use School Connect as the curriculum, because we have mostly middle school and high schools. And so School Connect is a great resource. And they also learn about Aperture and all the DESA, the student-facing one, as well as the adults rating students. And so that's all part of the training, because we have to build up our adult SEL in order to then deliver it to our students. So we're gonna move forward with my next question. This next question is, what feedback do students receive around social emotional learning? And I'll start with Ms. Katrina.
Yeah, so I touched on a little bit in the PowerPoint that we're using that DESA self rate for the kids to explore their own competencies on that. And then we adjust our lesson curriculum to follow those trends. As for individual feedback, especially with that DESA self rate, when I do get a referral from Malix from a student that may need some additional support, that's when I really take a even deeper dive look at those individual self rates to see where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are from their own perspective. So that can help me assess how this student is doing from a social work perspective for sure. But as we move forward, I can't wait until we administer this again until at the second half of the school year, so we can really spend more time about the growth that our students have had over the year and spend some dedicated class time celebrating the individual students that have had really high jumps.
I too am excited and eager to see that, and I'm looking forward to even hearing for the students shortly around that process and what that experience was like for them. Ms. Lewis, you also have some thoughts around what feedback do students receive around social emotional learning?
Yeah, so I'm in an interesting position because I taught my seniors now. I teach them ELA. I taught them advisory freshman year. So there's a large group of students that I did teach already and I saw as freshmen. So I think it's interesting to see how they've grown. I have a different perspective, obviously, because I don't teach advisory anymore, but because I did teach advisory, I recognize the importance of giving them verbal feedback for their self-awareness, for their relationship skills. I have one student that was not really coming to class, was not engaging, and he moved to in-person blended learning. And he was just killing it the other day. And I was so happy. And he was like reading a Shakespeare sonnet for us. And like, I was just like, amazing. So I literally ran out of my classroom to find him. And he was walking past the room. And I'm like, Jalen, is that you? Because I can't tell with their masks on. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, listen, you really, like, that was amazing. I really loved having you a part of that class today. And I think that's part of what I do in content is like, you always have to, even if it's not academic feedback, it's feedback like, you did really well today. It was awesome how you shouted out that person. There's one kid that will like put up the reactions like thumbs up and celebration and claps. He'll do that when somebody talks and somebody says something. And I told him the other day, like, that's very validating that you do that when people are speaking, because that makes them feel like they're being heard, and we don't always get that. So I think as far as feedback, I try to tell kids when I see them doing something, you know, against the grain for remote learning, that they're stepping out of the box, they're participating more.
I love that. I love that intentional work that you're doing with the students, and it actually leads me into the next question. We are in it is a pandemic, and so that has caused us to go into remote instruction. And so, Ms. O'Neill, I wanted to hear from you. What challenges and opportunities have arisen during remote SEL instruction?
So I think, well, any educator should be incorporating SEL skills, whether they, teach advisory or not. As Mr. Malix pointed out, these are things that we should be modeling and exempling in our personal lives. So it should naturally carry over to our professional. But opportunities to implement this, I found a lot of students sometimes in the classroom don't always speak, but they love to text. Surprisingly, teens love to text. And so I've had a lot of success in terms of feedback in the chat. Also, just finding creative ways for students to use, I think I want to call it their genius zone during classes, whether it's creating videos to kind of explain some socio-emotional concept. At the beginning of the school year, I did do an entire unit, Mr. Malix as well, as we collaborated with behavior and changing behaviors. And so seeing students put together PowerPoints and create skits and even like make their own videos specifically surrounding different behaviors that they would want to change. I think that only in this environment, I think students had the time and the resources to be able to do that. Some of the challenges though, of course, is the social connection. A lot of students are isolated. Some of them are at home alone during this learning period where they would be in a classroom surrounded with 28 other students, or at least with a caring adult. So that opportunity to be in close relationship, or at least close proximity with a caring individual, I think that's really the downfall of this pandemic. So super encouraged to still be continuing the work, even though it may look different. And happy to see that it hasn't gone anywhere, especially from BTech stores.
Thank you so much. I love Genius Zone. I think I'm gonna start to use that and think about, as we discuss the Genius Zone and social emotional learning skills, tapping into the Genius Zone. And so that brings me to this is gonna be one of our last questions. I have one more question after this. Is thinking about that Genius Zone, and I wanna come to you, Mr. Malix. How do teachers integrate SEL skills outside of direct instruction of advisory?
I think that it's easier to do in my content area because like emotional learning and mental health is already a large component of the health curriculum. And mental health is connected strongly with social health and the value of our relationships and how we use our relationships to cope with our emotions. For example, in the drugs and alcohol unit, we discuss what are the social and emotional reasons why people even try controlled substances, and then how drugs and alcohol negatively impact your relationships, which are part of your social health. Introducing empathy before teaching about addiction allows students to learn from a place of understanding when dealing with addiction in one's friend or family circle to support trauma-informed teaching.
I love that. I love that example, Mr. Malice, and I appreciate you for sharing and highlighting that. And so this is going to bring us to our last question, and then we'll move to our students. And I'm going to come to you, Ms. Lewis. And you kind of shared a little bit, so I'm gonna ask to share another student. But who is a student that inspires you to continue this work, and why?
I was thinking about, the students that kind of stay behind when you end the Zoom call. Like for instance, we had a lesson on the pandemic and we read a poem that was written during lockdown and we annotated it and we talked about our hopes and our fears. And that's like one of the ways, trying to integrate like that SEL stuff, like how are they dealing? How are they coping? What are their relationship skills like right now? And like student stayed behind and she was just like really opening up and saying like, I'm really glad we spoke about this because I just feel like I haven't had the opportunity to talk about it and I feel really, really isolated. And like, she'll send me like the other day, she sent me a TikTok of this girl reading a poem about being isolated in the pandemic. And like, I feel like we send things back and forth now and she's like very open and has this attachment now where it's like, oh, you've revealed yourself as somebody that I can talk to about this. So I think I look to the kids that will always stay behind after we talk about something because it's almost like they feel like they've unlocked something like, oh, well, let me talk to you after because you're bringing this up. So now I feel like I have an adult that I can talk to about it. So that really motivates me to, keep incorporating, keep asking how they are because you could ask a million times and on the million and first time that they finally break and they say like I really need someone to talk to, like I could be annoying for a little bit but they'll eventually open up and be happy that you asked.
Ms. Lewis, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know everyone here and on the call or on the webinar can think of a student that reminds them why this work is important and why you're here today to learn more and that we're sharing best practices as we do the work. And so that's going to bring a close to our faculty teacher panel. And we're going to, what I like to think is bring it to the stars of the webinar, which is our students, why we do this work and hear how this experience has impacted them in terms of having intentional development of social emotional learning and prioritizing that within the school building. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Katrina and Mr. Malix, and they're going to lead us with the students as we hear from them around their social emotional development. So I now turn it over to Ms. Katrina and Mr. Malix.
Thank you, Brandon. So let's go ahead and just start with some introductions from our students. So if you could tell us your name, what grade, and one thing about you, that'd be wonderful. Let's see, Ravindra, why don't you start with us off?
Hi, my name is Ravindra Arjun. I am a 9th grader, and a fun fact about me is I actually wanted to be a mechanical engineer at the age of 5.
That's awesome. Stick with those plans. You can make it happen. All right, Anthony, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Anthony Shakari. I'm in 9th grade, and fun fact about me is I learned how to play piano by myself.
That's amazing. And BTech actually got a piano this year. So Anthony has been able to play it. So that's been wonderful. He's one of our blended students. Tyler.
Hello, my name is Tyler Hoy. Fun fact about me is that I love reading, singing, and watching anime. I'm a 9th grader and a freshman.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. And Tamia.
Hi, my name is Tamia Dobson, and I'm a 10th grader. And one interesting fact about me is that I'm learning to play the guitar. I'm actually in the music club in the school, and they're teaching me how to play guitar.
That's awesome. Such musical people. And then Miss Maya.
Hi, my name is Maya Samsudeen. I'm in 9th grade, and I always wanted to be a veterinarian since I was smaller.
Wonderful. And you have any pets?
Yep, a pit bull.
Wonderful. Well, I hope to see your pit bull one of these days, Maya. All right, so we're going to start our question panels. And so I'm going to go ahead and start this off for Anthony. And the first question is, what is SEL and why is it important?
SEL is social and emotional learning. It is where children and adults achieve and apply knowledge and skills necessary to understand and control emotions. They also can set and achieve positive goals, how to feel empathy for others, and establish and maintain positive relationships, and make consecutive decisions based on how others are feeling.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony, for kicking us off. I know that's probably a little intimidating. And then Ms. Tyla, the same question to you. What is SEL and why is it important?
SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning Program, and it's very important because it helps you understand the people around you. It helps you understand to be more empathetic towards people and problems, and it helps you be able to understand people more and being able to help them without them asking for help.
Wonderful. I love that. Being able to tap into that intuitiveness so you can assist others around you. It's beautiful. And Mr. Malix, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. I will ask this question to Anthony and Tamia, but I'm going to ask Anthony to respond first. How have SEL skills helped you be successful in school, at home, in the community, especially with the challenges of remote learning?
It has helped me in letting me take a step back and understanding people and myself from a different perspective. Because we never know how little light burns in someone's life, and what we do they might extinguish it. But it has helped me take into account how to shift the mood or tone into a more enjoyable one.
Thank you. Tamia?
SEL has helped me to be successful because it taught me to better manage my emotions, and it makes me to be more understanding. SEL has helped me to be more self-aware about different things. Like if I was failing a class, instead of me getting upset about it, I would say to myself, my grade level is at a level that I don't like. What can I do to fix it? And now that I'm more self-aware, I can say, oh, maybe if I handed my work on time, ask for help when needed, or procrastinate less, maybe I can hand in my work on time and then I'll have a better grade. SEL also helps me to it helps me to better manage my time. Like I now have time to do my work and do other things and manage to do all my things on time.
Thank you. My next question is for Maya. What SEL competency are you working on right now? And what SEL competency are you most proud of your growth in?
The SEL competency I am working on most on is self-management and social awareness. I'm working on my sleep schedule and working out being a better person. SEL competency I am most proud of my growth is social awareness. I'm proud of being more empathetic, trying to understand other people's feeling better, listening more, and being more kind.
Thank you. Take it away, Katrina, the next questions.
Yeah, of course. So my next question is, what would be different about your community if more kids use the skills that you've been taught? Ms. Tyla.
I think the environment would be more safe. People would not be afraid to voice their opinions because they're ensured that they wouldn't be judged, and we wouldn't have this typical hierarchy in high school where you have the people who are popular, the people who are in the middle, and the ones who are just, there. I think that it would be more of an even playing, people would understand others more, and you wouldn't have as much fights in school or outside of school. And people would have a lot more genuine friendships instead of friendships based on like personal interest or whether that person's useful to you or not. You actually have people that you can count on, whether you're feeling sad, you're in trouble, you have people you can lean on.
That's awesome. I really like how you put that. It builds your value in relationships in addition to creating some equitable playing field for everyone. So, Ravindra, I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into the equity question for you. So, equity is about making sure that kids have similar opportunities to succeed regardless of their backgrounds. So, how do you think SEL skills help us improve equity?
Okay, so I think SEL skills can help us improve equity by keeping seminars and workshops to educate and inform everyone about possible ways to improve equity in our schools. Secondly, making flyers or paintings to promote this movement. Thirdly, carry out monthly sessions with schools to promote and practice equity. And fourthly, reflecting on past racisms as well as biases and trying to find solutions to improve this.
I love it, Ravindra. You're always thinking big picture and at the most people we can reach. So I think that you and Miss Henry need to sit down and plan the rest of BTEC's future. So you've got this. So thank you, Brandon, for allowing us to have our student panel, and I'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Katrina. And so that brings us to our question and answer portion. You can use the question and answer tab. You can also write it in the chat as I'm monitoring the chat. And we would love to hear any questions that you have for students and questions that you have for staff. Ms. Henry, the principal, please put them in the question and answer or write them in the chat so that we can share and learn from each other in terms of what people are thinking and what are your wonderings around the work and what you've seen from BTEC. We get a lot of positive feedback. Everybody just thanking the students. And so this is from Marie. How much time does a social worker, teacher, et cetera, spend planning together for lessons and looking at data? So maybe I'll come to you, Ms. Prashad, for that question.
Hi. So to answer your question about how much time we spend together, myself, Mr. Malik, and the social work intern, Ms. Plewinski, spend about 2 periods together, which is about 90 minutes a week. And then Ms. Plewinski has her individual time that she spends with a social worker to do her clinical aspect of her internship. So together, it's about 2 to 3 hours a week when you combine it all together. And then during the time, the 90 minutes that we spend together, we plan out lessons, we look at School Connect lessons together, and we incorporate the health content into it so that it's one cohesive lesson.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Prashad, for responding to that. Another question, and this might be Ms. Prashad. Ms. Henry, maybe you want to answer this one as well. I think about community days and some of the works for this question and whatnot, but do all your teachers incorporate SEL? If so, what was the journey to get there?
So I'll just start, and then Ms. Prashad can build on that. Like I said at the beginning, it's really hard when you have your master program to implement all the things that are critical to the success of your program. And so our entry point, like they said, once was where we started with 1 grade, and we got to another grade, and then we kind of had to dial back a little bit during the pandemic year. But what we did was found creative solutions like what you mentioned, Brandon, community days, or this year specifically for the pandemic, every week, because of this virtual structure, every week, all teachers are advisors essentially. And so every week we implement a SEL lesson from the principal to our school aides to every member of the community. There is an accountability and a responsibility to ensuring that we develop and also we help our students build their social and emotional learning. So we've just been really innovative and creative. If this is the thing that you value, then you find ways to make it work in as creative ways as you can.
And to just expand on what Ms. Henry has said, you have to lead by example. So Ms. Henry provides opportunities for all staff members, not just teachers, to engage in acts of self-care together, to be conscious of what it is that we need as working adults during a pandemic. And we take those experiences and we implement them in our classrooms, right? So we try to incorporate questions and opportunities for students to engage in discussions with us about how they're feeling about a particular topic or issue that is going on in the country or in the classroom, in the school community. But it just allows us all to engage with our kids on a different level that's not necessarily academic, but more of a human interaction and a back and forth, a conversation about how they're feeling and what they're going through.
Thank you so much, Ms. Henry and Ms. Prashad, with that and showing the journey and the intentionality there. We're going to come to this next question, and so I'll kind of open it up. I mean, I have some answers here, but I'll let the school respond. Thank you for sharing your. This is from Nezibi. Hello, thank you for all sharing valuable thoughts and opinions. My question is for the educators. We are planning to create a SEL culture in my school. Could you please share organizations where you get adult SEL training? So I know that BTEC does work with the Urban Assembly and we provide that, but I know you've worked with some other organizations as well.
Did you want me to go? Is that what you were saying?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so we've also partnered with, but this is more local in New York. Power Tools is what's local. And I guess, and in New York, we kind of have what's called sometimes community-based organizations. So if you're a community school, you have a community-based organization, and usually those organizations also help with developing social emotional learning. But Urban Assembly has been our kind of founding partner, as it were, in this work. And they have I think what we appreciate about the partnership is that there is flexibility. Brandon, we appreciate that, right? Because schools, whether you're middle school, high school, STEM school, whatever it is, right? We all have these discrete visions for our schools, and we recognize that SEL is a thread. And so I think being able to kind of think about creatively how you can partner with organization Urban Assembly that allows you to grow or adapt based on needs of your school, even in a pandemic, I think is really, really critical.
And just to add on, there's another organization that we work with called Ramapo for Children. And so just for the missing link for some of you, I believe personally, and at our school, we do that restorative justice and restorative practices fall in line with social emotional learning. They're approaches to how to deal with things that may come up in your school community. And so they do work together. So if you are looking for somewhere to start and you don't have a direct connection to an SEL institution or a curriculum, you can start with restorative practices as well.
Absolutely, I love that, and absolutely, the Urban Assembly is a great place to start for the one individual who asked that question. We'd love to talk with you more, and like I said, we highlight a part of this is part of Aperture does some really great work around assessment and working with teachers around that. School Connect is the curriculum that is used, and they do some great work as well around adult development as well. So I want to highlight them. There's several questions I'm going to skip around. I'm going to try to make sure we get to all of them because we do have till 2:30, and I know these are questions that other people are thinking. So there's one question that I thought was really good. I'm just going to skip to it. This is from Alfonso. How is equity addressed in the lessons? Are equity and go-to moves to address racism, sexism, et cetera, taught as well? So if maybe Ms. Prashad, Ms. Henry can speak, but if as well as Ms. Prashad in terms of that scope and sequence in some of the lessons.
Katrina, do you want to grab this one?
Yeah, do you mind just repeating that one more time for me?
How is equity addressed in the lessons? Talking about racism, sexism, is that taught as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. We definitely address all of that in our lessons, and health is a great class to integrate that with, because we're talking about like physical anatomy, we're talking about intimacy and sex education and those kinds of things. So you do have to really incorporate, you know, gender identity into those conversations. You have to incorporate different sexuality into those conversations. And so that's why, like, we wanted to highlight why it's nice to have a great integrative panel for your curriculum planning to help have those additional perspectives of inclusion and trauma informed that, you know, you need help with thinking about, right? Because we all come from our one perspective and we all have unknown biases that we don't realize. So having that team for planning curriculum is really beneficial. And, you know, Malix is the one that's actually teaching, so he can speak to more about how the students reflect to those conversations.
Well, why don't the students answer the question? That's what I was focusing on how did you become interested in learning about SEL, and what do we adults need to do so you students want to learn and be engaged with SEL? Because I'm really curious of hearing from my students on that question.
Oh, you want to ask a question back to the students?
Yeah.
Well, we'll do that separately, I think. So we'll keep the attendees happy. So Brandon, you're welcome to grab another question then out of the room.
Well, actually, I'm gonna come to the students because this question,
Okay.
this question did come in, and I think it's great for our students to answer it. So, you know, I'm open to whoever, Ravindra or Anthony or Tamia, who wants to answer this. But how did you feel about the self-assessment, and do you feel that it helps you? We talked about it a little bit, but how do you feel about the self-assessment, and how do you feel it helps you? And any student can come off and answer that question around when they did the self-assessment.
So I feel like the self-assessment helped me to know what I need to what I need to work on and things that I'm good at with SEL, and also some things that I need to work on to, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamia. I'm gonna stay with the assessment. This question came from Patrick, and I think we used a 42 question DESA, but he asked, have you used the DESA 72 question survey? I think we used the 44 question survey. How have you implemented changes based on this information? And so I'll open that to Ms. Prashad, or if Ms. O'Neill would like to potentially answer this question around using the assessment and the data that you get back from that.
You can
I don't
start.
see Ms. Prashad. I'm
We
muting.
both unmute. You can start and then I'll finish.
Part of the DESA, which is really great, is that it's not something, again, that we give to students or is at students, but we do it with students. So the students actually get to fill out a survey about the teachers as well. And we become kind of the model, the exemplar, to start things off with the DESA. So the students answer the same questions about us as the teacher before we, in turn ask to them, or we record on them. So when the students, they give us the feedback, and then we go through what the feedback looks like with the students when we initially do it at the beginning of the school year. It's less daunting, right? It's less scary because I just did this with the teacher. The teacher allowed us to ask these questions and to give this feedback, and so it's okay. It's not going to hurt. But initially, after the questions are asked and the data is going through, what we used to do, and I'm sure they still do this, we would sit together as a group, like all the advisory teachers, and we would sit down and we would kind of look at some of the trends, right? What were maybe the higher populated areas in terms of needs of growth in terms of SEL. And we would create ways within School Connect's curriculum to kind of like highlight those things with certain classes, depending on what we were seeing. And so as the school year progressed, and we continue to look at the trends, we do it again at the end of the school year. And so the hope and the goal is always that your strengths become stronger and your weaknesses become strengths. And I could say that that was the trend the first 2 years that we did the program. Again, this is the third year of us doing the program. The first year that we've embedded it solely into a content. So prior, again, there was an advisory class, and we would do the DESA with the students at the beginning of the school year. And it was cool because I think the second year that we did it, I had freshmen both years. The second year that we did it, I allowed the students to self-assess as well as be assessed by their teachers. So we did it as a grade team. So the entire ninth grade team sat together and we kind of went through the DESA and we scored the student, and then we allowed them to score themselves and saw what similarities, what discrepancies existed between what the students saw and what we saw as educators. And that was super valuable because when we would have kid talks in our grade teams, we were able to kind of pull out those things and say, hey, we noticed that you didn't see yourself pretty high in this particular area, whether it's advocacy or time management. But we noticed that when you shared the do now, you're helping your younger brother and sister get ready for school in the morning. You're assisting your grandmother with groceries. Like, you're doing all these things that show that you're actually very strong in this area. And being able to frame it in that way, I think kind of helped the students to see themselves in a different light. Hopefully I'm answering your question, but that's how we adjusted based off what the DESA said. First, we brought it to the student and allowed them to kind of self-assess, and then we figured out ways that we can either reveal to the student where they actually were or find more opportunities for growth in that particular area.
Yeah,
the chat's getting big. I don't know where we are anymore.
Yeah, no, Ms. O'Neill, that's so important. I mean, that's one big part of the DESA is it's about observable behaviors, right? And so sometimes with observable behaviors, it actually, one thing I think was really great about the DESA for teachers in terms of when they self-assess, when they assess students, is they have to ask themselves of this 42 question, or if you use the 72 question, do I give students opportunity to actually do these behaviors in my classroom, right? That's really important, right? In terms of how our pedagogy, and making sure we do that. And I think that's one aspect that I really love about the DESA. Another question that it comes from is Karen and Rebecca kind of asked a similar question. And one is, what are some strategies you found helpful in getting all teachers to implement SEL throughout the day, building culture? And then Rebecca, I'm just scrolling for her question because it's similar. I'm wondering how you get the buy-in. When I taught middle school, many of the subject teachers wanted nothing to do with SEL, right? So I'm thinking about at BTech, we had community days and celebrations. So one thing that I just want to share, and then I'll let Miss Henry add on to it and let share maybe what that experience was like, was that one thing we did is we celebrated teachers and students in terms of their SEL development. So monthly, we were giving out certificates that highlighted students making progress in different areas, as well as giving certificates to teachers and they were nominated by students. But what was really impactful on these certificates and these plaques was that what the teacher said about the student and what the student said about the teacher in terms of the impact was on their certificate or the plaque. So it was, Ms. Prashad has helped me develop self-awareness by, or it was Tamia is receiving this certificate because she has displayed social self-management by doing XYZ. Obviously, because these are all ninth graders, so they haven't experienced that just yet in terms of an in-person setting. But I think that that's one aspect of creating the notion of buy-in, because people start to see, all the times with social emotional learning, you might not necessarily see, it's not a grade all the time, right? So you can't get the A, B, C, or D. So you need that verbal affirmation, you need that celebration, you need that quote, so that you know the work that you're doing is actually working. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Henry to share a little more as well.
Yeah, I think that was, I think it was a really great community building opportunity for us to kind of come together and hear what the students think about us, and not just acknowledging students. So that was something that was really exciting and celebratory as a school. But I also would say, for us, we are in our 7th year, and I am the second principal. And so we had gone through a whole transitional process of the school, redefining ourselves, right? Like, who are we as an organization? What do we value? and done a great deal of like vision work about our ideal graduate and who did we need to become as an organization in order for our students to actualize the dreams that we have for them and that they have for themselves. And so I think that it became almost a law of attraction, because we believed in this, that this was a part of that process. And we really focused on our culture, our school culture, colleague to colleague, and then how we were interacting and engaging with our young people. So, and then there was just a lot of, we had there was a committee of folks, our SEL team, with support from Brandon, and they were very intentional about consistently meeting throughout the course of the year to unpack data, to develop PD, to develop lessons, right? So it became an easy lift, let's say, for the teachers, because it was, we've done all the pre-work. I think my advice would be really think about like, how does SEL align with the vision of your school, right? If you're a school administrator, and then if it's a teacher facing, how do you ensure that the teacher is getting the support, the tools, the strategies, the time to be able to enter into this conversation? And why are we doing this, right? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Like, why are we engaged in SEL? Is it the new rave, or is it we believe that's going to help us to actualize the vision for our school? And I think just having that mindset and that approach really helped build momentum across our school. And we just tried to figure out really creative ways to keep all the members of the school community engaged.
I think also just from like a teacher's perspective, when I came to BTech, like I would often hear from other teachers like the positivity they received from being culturally responsive, from like teaching kids self-awareness, from like responding to kids when they did something good, from having like door room conversations where they actually spoke to the kids as they entered the room. Like, so I think that when we came together as a staff and would share these experiences we had, it made me feel like, I see how this is working with other teachers. I see how the students respond to that. It makes more sense to be, implementing this in my classroom, because I'll get more out of the students if they feel like they know me as a person. And I was just, when you brought up the awards, like I just wanted to show, this is right next to my desk. Every day I look at it. The student Olayla wrote me a beautiful message here, and like, I think when the teachers, like Brandon said, when the teachers and the students had those awards, it was like, I felt impacted by that. I felt like, oh my God, like Sheila thinks that about me. I can't believe I had an impact on her. She had such an impact on me. It was so reciprocal. So I think for teachers and students alike, when you see like what comes of it and you see it honored, you think, I need to do this more and more, because this is how students learn the best.
I think also, sorry, Brandon, just 2 seconds. As the instructional lead, I do a lot of behind the scenes work. And so when we send out surveys to teachers and students, when I get to compare the two and I see that students nominated teachers and the same teacher nominated that student, when I see those teachers in the hallway and I tell them when they get their certificate, they're always so like intrigued, and they're always so excited to know that they were chosen and that they chose that same person. So the energy is usually always reciprocated.
Absolutely. I think that, again, I used to love, I was so excited when we had communities. I remember like one time we had to like move it, and I was like, I got really sad, because I just remember like the impact that, students and teachers had in that setting when we were able to celebrate individuals for their social emotional development. And that also just also highlights the importance. That's the priority. People are making it a commitment to do that. And so I'm trying to find, I think there was a question to students, and I'm actually lost it in the chat. But I think it was something around, I want to try to find it. It was from Brenda. And so here it is. Okay, this is for the students. So any one of the students can come off and answer this one. How did you become interested in learning about social emotional learning? So these students, I know you're all 9th graders. Through this, what this experience when you started in 9th grade, and some of you may have not even met each other yet, right? You've only met each other on the computer, potentially. How did you become interested in learning about social emotional learning? And what do we adults need to do so that students want to learn and be engaged with social emotional learning?
Well, what got me into it is Mr. Malek's, actually. Since me coming to high school, I thought most of my attractions would be like schoolwork and hang out with friends. But Mr. Malek was the teacher who got me more intrigued into BTech and was actually close, like more than a teacher is, and understands the students and connects to them on a different level than any other teacher would. So doing that, I ended up talking with Mr. Malek a lot, and then he told me about SEL and social and learning, and that's how I got into it.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing that. And Mr. Malek, you can get another shout out. You're doing great work. And it's very evident through the responses from the students this year. So I think that covers, there's no more questions in the question box. I've gotten all the questions that I caught in the chat. And we're coming to a close. We have 5 minutes left. If there's no more questions, I just want to say thank you to Aperture for allowing us to do this webinar series. This is the second of 3. So we did one in March. We've done this one today, and then we have another one on Friday. So please sign up if you're interested in more. And I think one thing you'll take away is these are 3 different schools and 3 different approaches. And so as Ms. Henry highlighted, like at the Urban Assembly, our big focus is around implementation, but that looks different at every school. And so it's creating tools that allow for it to live and breathe how it looks best in the school, no matter what the overarching goal is, to teach social emotional learning skills. But the process by which you get there looks different in every school, every focus, and it's a great journey. And I just want to thank, again, Aperture, thank School Connect as well, who's a part of this one, and we use their curriculum. And I also just want to thank the students for being here, taking time out of their day. And thank you to BTech for just allowing the Urban Assembly to be a part of your family as you build an amazing school with social emotional learning at the core. And if Ms. Henry, if you want to share any last few words, as the esteemed leader, you can,
You got it, Brandon. This was just really amazing, though. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And we wish you the very best as you kind of chart your own path for your SEL programs in your school. Thank you so much.
Definitely. And thank you again to Emily and Kristen and the Aperture family as we just continue to disseminate work. That's what this is about. It's about sharing best practices so that we all get better. We're all thinking about these things and how we can improve our schools in the best way. Or what I like to say, it's not about these kids or those kids, it's all our kids, right? And so if we share these best practices, we can all get better and learn from one another to make the world, to make our communities a better place. So thank you. Have a marvelous Monday, and we'll see you again in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And thank you to our absolutely amazing panel today. Brandon did a fantastic job gathering this amazing team of students and staff from BTech. The chat was obviously filled with tons of appreciation, gratitude, and the stories and perspectives shared today were amazing. Words really can't express the impacts that these open conversations and discussions have had on everyone who joined us today. So thank you so much. One thing that I would like to highlight that was really cool for me is I got to see behind the scenes and the panel interacting each other, both before the presentation and actually during live. We had an internal chat. Everybody from the students to the staff were just encouraging each other and shouting each other out. And it was tangible at how much both SEL and everybody on this panel really means to each other. So that was amazing to see. So thank you for letting me peek into that. On behalf of Aperture Education, thank you all for your time today. We are so grateful. I do have a couple quick things, like Brandon said. We do have our 3rd part of our 3-part series with the Urban Assembly on Friday, April 16th at 1:30 p.m. This last showcase is titled Implementing and Sustaining High Quality SEL in Alternative Settings. And that's with New Vision aims high schools 1 and 2. I will send a registration link in our email. You'll also be getting a copy of the recording along with the presentation and YouTube link, thanks to our awesome BTech team. And you'll also get a certificate of attendance within 24 hours. The last thing I have is Aperture is really excited to announce and talk about our first SEL conference, which is SEL Vision Summit, Level Up Your SEL, on May 20th. Brandon and David Adams from the Urban Assembly will both be presenting at the conference. So if you're looking for more, be sure to check that out. I'll include a link in the email. And I think that will do it for us today. Thank you so much to our amazing panel and for everybody who takes time out of their day to join us. I know you're all as empowered by our panel and students and staff as I was today. So thank you all so much for joining us.